All right, yeah, thank you for that introduction.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here. Yeah, wow, the Viva and now this. I hope this will be easier than your Viva.
Hope so.
Makes you feel like a glutton for punishment, really. But that's great for you. So your new book, The New Flesh, it feels like the midpoint, as you sort of suggest in the preface, it's a midpoint of a sort of trilogy of things that you've been working on. Mm-hmm. You've got Anti-Oculus that came out 2 years ago, was it? Or last year? Last year. The New Flesh, and then you've got forthcoming a new introduction to Mark Fisher's PhD thesis, Flatline Constructs. I wondered maybe to introduce the book and maybe what you've been doing the past few years. Where does this sit for you?
So what I've been doing for the past few years is posting. No, but in all seriousness, so this book came out of the work on cybernetics that we've been doing with Acid Horizon and indeed Anti-Oculus. And a lot of it came out of an engagement with the work of Mark Fisher, particularly his PhD thesis, Flatline Constructs. And part of this was because, in a way, a lot of the stuff we've been doing has been in sort of the shadow of Mark Fisher. The problem is that I don't want to become him, because in many ways his relationship to the online was incredibly... I mean, he wrote about his own, the ways these circuits are designed to capture and addict attention, and is part of a wider system of control, not so much as disciplining you, but delimiting your possibilities of action in advance. And so this book was really something of a kind of madness, to the extent that I wanted to think about, working in, I guess, what we could call content creation for a few years as a kind of side job. One of the things you do wonder is, why is everyone acting sort of increasingly online as if they're offline? Why are the people who live in our phones so emotionally powerful to us that we can wake up and then look at our phones and then go, oh, fuck's sake, now I'm angry? And I wanted to have a look generally at sort of what that was doing, and indeed who I was doing it for, in the sense of, if you are on a platform, your job is, it doesn't feel like a job, but you're essentially producing content in between advertisements. Anytime you consume something, or if you post something, it produces metrics. Those are sold on to advertising companies, and so on and so forth. I mean, it doesn't have to be a social media brain thing, thank God, or maybe probably not in that case. A Tesco Club card, for example. It's a discount for data you're producing. It is literally a thing of what you desire, what they have in stock, how they can circulate it, restricted to the area in which you most currently shop. They even do like a Spotify Wrapped at Tesco Express. I think I might have been in the top 1% for cider for 2023. And so I just wanted to sort of dig into how data production in an increasingly sort of cybernated society was permeating everything. And sadly, it was permeating everything, and it was far worse than I could have expected, looking into stuff like micro work, data moderation, and also that this was being written as the onslaught of so-called artificial intelligence. There's no such thing. So-called artificial intelligence machines are picking up hype. And insofar as our data was feeding these data sets, and indeed training things like drones, you'd have to take it from me, the Israeli arms firm Elbit, who are gradually being forced out of the United Kingdom by the comrades over at Palestine Action, they say it's battle-tested. I mean, a data set is not just a bit of tech, it's a set of social relations. And indeed, not necessarily new ones. They're the same relations of producing data as a commodity, but we can do it in faster and more diffuse ways. So I wanted to explore that, as well as the kind of mania of a certain kind of production within the online space and how that feeds back into behaviour.
Because partly in reading the new book, there was a sort of thinking back also to Anti-Oculus, and there's a bit that the sort of passage in that book that still really sticks in my mind is where you talk about cybernetics of, I guess, the kettle, the humble kettle, and kettling. This system of kind of exacerbating things to boiling point, and I suppose in principle, dissipating or capturing that energy, which is kind of a really, I think, a quite affecting example to think about in the context of meat space, I suppose. But whereas online it feels like that relationship, that the kind of biopolitical, in something like kettling, that feels so explicit. There's a sort of theme of obfuscating that relationship between flesh, I suppose. how do you see that those things kind of how does that kind of process that maybe we're more familiar with or more aware of in IRL, how has that changed, do you think, or mutate in the communicative technologies?
So I think first of all, I think generally users of technology have less and less information available to them, or at least they know less in their practical relations with these objects than ever before. So previously, if you knew someone is into computers, they had to kind of be into computers. They could do some rudimentary fixing, replace some parts, so on and so forth. These days, if you have an iPad, there's a little cogwheel at the bottom and the settings part, and if you go into that and it can't solve what you want, then you take it to the Apple Store and they say, fuck you, buy a new one. The user experience is essentially flattening the actual operations behind these machines. I mean, you can spend more time learning them, but that is, who has time for that nonsense? And usually it's kept behind various paywalls and basically official copyright strands anyway. And so I think things are becoming more obscurant in terms of our relationship to these platforms. We're not told that in a way we're sort of doing work for these platforms by posting on them. I mean, we don't change anything on YouTube by posting on it. We just sort of make the code express what we're putting onto it. We don't change the code of YouTube. And in terms of, I think the fundamental thing now is in the image that is typically called AI or generative AI, which is not. It's generative algorithmic processes which essentially collate various other data from other people, moderated by people usually in refugee camps or in incredibly poor labour conditions like in Kenya, and we say AI. I mean, it's incredibly blatant. Jeff Bezos, his big data moderation platform, he called it Mechanical Turk, after the famous machine which seems like a machine but has a man in it. He called it artificial AI. But because, the Sam Altmans of the world and the radicalised fascist billionaire class, who are always pre-fascist, but this time they're more into it. You can blame Nick Land for that. They do really believe in these machines, that they really are. Oh my God, it could be God. I mean, Kissinger, in his last moments on this earth, was writing books with the ex-CEO of Google and some nobody academic about how, this is a horrible thing, we can't control it. You've got to hand Sam Altman and his mates $1 billion and basically nationalise them. So this comes, and I think the obscuring of the relations of production that go into technology in the most diffuse manners that we end up producing things for platforms. I mean, well, not just the internet, but platforms specifically as they come to dominate it. Those are the things that are being obscured.
I guess you've already invoked the spectre of Nick Land, and we're talking about, I guess,
he comes back, kill him again. Yeah.
But also writing after Mark Fisher, this kind of, I guess more broadly, like the CCIU's approach to cybernetics. And the one thing that I guess I'm kind of really fascinated by, and just to get your take on in this context, is I guess what they were so fascinated by. I mean, to quote old Nick, there's this obsession or fascination with a philosophy of production that becomes atheistic, orphan, and inhuman. In the technocosmos, nothing is given, everything is produced. And I mean, my own research is on this orphan concept at the moment, but what seems to have changed so much from this kind of fetishization maybe or a real fascination with this, a breaking, the new communicative technologies allowing us to escape a lot of our old habits. There's now this general feeling of AI is like our, if not God, a kind of, is a child that we feed and are raising. There's no longer an orphaned cyberspace. It's something that we have a kind of parental role in rearing. What happened? How did that change, do you think? That if there are the CCIU partly to blame, or is there, what's changed where that just doesn't really hold sway anymore?
I mean, the technology was running faster than their ability to analyse it. And I think in terms of what they were trying to do, I think there was something quite good in it. I mean, so the CCIU's rough plan was, because capital is regimenting everything in terms of labour time and regimenting the time that we spend doing anything with our lives, it tries to make it work towards them. This is Marx's Capital Volume 1, the big chapter on the struggle about how long the working day is. Insofar as they thought everything was becoming computerized, then the capitalist organisation of the time of our lives is tied to computation. in comes in Y2K. Its theoretical possibility means that if we accelerate the process, by which they mean essentially run with computations to the extent that before they could fix the Y2K bug, every computer would basically explode in terms of it would lose its ability to stratify time. That was basically their plan. And to be fair to them, it's not a bad one as far as you go. It is a bit of a one neat trick plan of things. But, I mean, the technology outrun them, I think, because they were working within this Blade Runner imaginary, which is, for them, the replicants, the androids, they have no mother, they have no father, they're completely outside of social reproduction, and they can sort of run amok and destroy it. The problem is that I think Mark Fisher noticed this as well. These machines didn't break us out of our subjectivity. If anything, they kept us in it more than before. They feed into our habits. I mean, people sort of take their phones out, and I do this myself, if you're on the tube, it's basically like going back home in a way. It's like going back home for a bit. You've got all your little comforts, your little treats, you've got your treat machine in your pocket. And I think this reterritorialization of subjectivity through the medium of they couldn't have seen it. I mean, there's other problems with them as well. I mean, Nick Land and Reza Negarestani's particular fixation on intelligence without properly historicising it. I mean, I think there's a sort of a eugenic through line to that, but that's not all of them by far. I mean, Sadie Plant, Kojo Eshin, they still do a lot of good work in that area.
I guess I wanted at this point maybe to ask a question that you ask your reader in the book. Because if this is maybe the situation that we found ourselves in with this, and I think it's really vital work that there's always that kind of a strange, maybe intellectual lag where there's a real fascination again with this noughties philosophy, even though the technology has like massively outstripped it. What are we doing now? And I guess it's that, at least for what, if there is the vaguest through line between CCIU and what you've been doing with Acid Horizon, there is this interest in how we, maybe not get ahead of the technology, but at least escape this kind of capture. And I guess there's a question that you asked really, really succinctly in the book when you say, when it comes to short-circuiting the habits and addictions of platform, plug-in, and control, what can a body do? What can a body do, Adam?
I'm trying to work it out, to be honest, because, if you want to focus on the body just briefly, the reason why it's called The New Flesh, and not just because David Cronenberg makes very fine films, it's because partially The New Flesh is defined as not simply an extension of the body through media. That's kind of just commodity fetishism, because your data is not an extension of you. One, because you don't own it. You can write a digital will, you can go to the Digital Will Foundation, it's all owned by the platform, that's theirs, that's it. But it's the body that acts like the data it produces. So it's a feedback loop of behaviour modifications started up by interacting on these platforms. So rather than you just being influenced, because otherwise it would just be influence. It has to be a particular kind of subjectivity for a particular kind of production. But one of the other things I do with Flesh is take on the idea of a body schema from Maurice Merleau-Ponty and Catherine Malibu. And for example, if your phone feels like it's gone off and it's not, it is in the other room, this is ultimately something that was first detected in ER doctors due to pagers. And what it does is, my thesis is, it basically is an extension of the body schema, because the brain, for one, doesn't have a direct relationship to the body. It has a map of the body, and it has a map of where its connections are. And that's where, if, for example, if the territory is missing, if you lose an arm, you can sometimes still feel it. Similar to the phone. It's why the cyberspace is a mapping, and then so is the brain mapping. So I think Flesh there does what the body can do. We can interact with it. There are parts of Confluence, which is the phone extension, but there's also parts of, honestly, where it doesn't work. It's why some people get VR sickness. It's why you have to smoke weed to go into VR as opposed to doing line of speed as you would have done in the world of William Gibson's Neuromancer. But in terms of what can the body do in cyberspace, it depends how you can find a way for this to feed back in. So in terms of, I don't think the internet is all bad, for example. There are archives of ways of transforming yourself. The example I give is from Trans Studies. So Mel White Chen, their work on what they call a viral archive. This is an archive of transformations rather than a typical archive of fixed, dead, delimited forms. And their example is the transition timelines of Asian transgender men. And I think that's a brilliant example of in a way, if we can adapt this feedback loop somehow, we can therefore determine the thing that determines us. We can sort of take hold of that feedback loop. We can do things condition our habits, but platforms are built the way they are for a reason. They don't give you much space to do that.
I guess there's this tension too. I guess of how do we tap into that that notion of change. I mean, Cronenberg is like this is the figure that you evoke with the title, but there's this. So I snuck into the Slade yesterday to go to a reading group. The particular authoritarian about letting people in there, it's really weird. But it was a reading group for Laurent Ballant's Cruel Optimism. And there's a bit in the introduction to that book where they talk about how a kind of crisis ordinariness. If we think about that, they make a distinction between trauma and crisis. I guess a trauma, psychologically speaking, is something, an event that you kind of can't narrativize for yourself. It free floats and cause all kinds of problems. A crisis is something you kind of want to be good in a crisis, so you normalize a crisis so then you can act within it. And I guess that kind of came to mind when we were reading the book, where you talk about that feeling of, you know, that phantom vibration in your pocket being first noticed in A&E or whatever, and now we all feel it. There's this kind of a real crisis ordinariness, and I guess it's this that being a function of cybernetics in itself. There's like this a Leotard quote that I was thinking of too. There is in every cybernetic system a unit of reference which allows the disparity produced by the introduction of an event into the system to be measured. Then, thanks to this measure, this system can be translated into information for the system. Which I guess is just that, like, you know, we kind of want to understand the ruptures that happen, and I guess that's a lot of what capitalism, 20th century capitalism, is all about. That crises happen and we are able to absorb them without seemingly much disturbance. So when you're talking about the new flesh, and I guess that's partly, I wonder what you think about that when, for Cronenberg, it is a real trauma to grow a kind of vaginal VHS slot in your stomach.
Yeah.
But we have a kind of new, we've gone through a Cronenbergian transformation. We're just not horrified by it. Should we be?
I mean, it's too late to be horrified by it now. I mean, maybe not in somewhere other than London, but in London, yeah, we're fucked, to be honest. But no. I mean, Cronenberg has changed his revulsion at body horror, and he's kind of gone a bit accelerationist with that Crimes of the Future movie, which I won't spoil. But, I mean, Videodrome was always something I was somewhat trying to get away. Ironically, it's the worst way to get away from Videodrome, because this book's mostly influenced by a different Cronenberg movie, ironically, called Naked Lunch. It's William Burroughs. It's his pseudo-biography of William Burroughs when he's writing Naked Lunch and essentially not entirely sure if what he's writing is true or what writing is feeding back into him. And I watched that movie the morning we submitted the manuscript for Antioculus, and I watched it and I thought, fucking hell, am I high? This is great. You know, did I write something true? Or, you know, I wrote that sort of fake counterinsurgency manual, but all the things I talked about in that were real. Is the organisation real? And there was sort of that weird sort of nice, a pleasant schizoid burning. I don't know. But in terms of, I mean, our capacity to take on board crisis now. I mean, systems can sometimes take on crisis. That requires them to be open to new information and indeed having processes to update its capacity to recognise crisis. No system on this island can recognise crisis nor wants to because, well, you can simply... I mean, look, columnists will talk to MPs will talk to columnists. If you watch the news, they're not talking to you, they're talking to themselves. I think they're caught in some sort of masturbatory splendour where they already set the terms of their own debate, and they can't take information in. I mean, Biden couldn't take information in, even to save his own genocidal regime. He couldn't take it in.
Yeah.
And because it's right, because it's the same thing with the billionaires. It's correct because it's correct. It works because it works. And if you don't tell me it works, I will sack you and get someone who does. It's the same thing with the fact that, you know, that fucking Mohammed bin Salman has been able to disappear 100,000 people and kill 20,000 more building that stupid fucking line. because a bunch of rich Scandi architecture firms wouldn't say no to him, and he wouldn't be told no, unless he wanted to be seen walking backwards out of the Saudi consulate. I mean, I don't think these systems can take new information in. If anything, in Antioculus, we were probably too optimistic about their cybernetic capacities, because so far I think they haven't really had a kind of. There's not really the threat of a nuclear-armed Soviet Union to sort of get them to maybe think otherwise about anything at this point, and they're not quite afraid of a workers' movement yet, or at least not an existing one. They're afraid of every movement apart from the existing one, but they simply are not able to take in the information. They're all kind of, in a way, somewhat Landian about it.
I mean, there's something quite horrifying about you saying, reflecting maybe too optimistic in a book that only came out a year ago. But I guess also there's that lag with, I mean, I first read your book back in March, I think, for a proofread. We're in closing in on, I guess, well, yeah, nearly December, nearly 2025. Feels like a lot has happened since I guess you finished this book. Continuing genocide in Gaza, and we're now looking forward to a new Trump administration. We've got Keith in power here. Any feelings changed already since you finished this, and the way that everything just keeps happening?
Sorry, the Joker laugh that was involuntary. I mean, it's not going to get better. I think on the basis that they're not really afraid of anything anymore, and they don't really recognise any threats or imposition. I mean, they can't even tackle a fucking Jeremy Clarkson, yet alone any other incipient fascist movement. I mean, I know social fascism is a Stalinist way of reading things, but in the absence of any social democratic offers of welfare, I think it does work for the 1,000-year Reich we seem to be living through. Hopefully the Sturmabteilung isn't coming in to arrest us all at some point. But, I mean, I'm not optimistic, no. I mean, insofar as impunity has now basically been granted to the tech billionaires, Mark Andreessen. I mean, Trump is basically going to nationalise OpenAI to some extent, or people like Musk. I mean, we are being recorded, so I'm trying to modulate what I'm saying here, because I don't want to get Housmans in trouble. But it's not going to get better unless we start, doing things.
Yeah.
maybe getting rid of some of the data centers, because I think one of the ways it is going to get worse is Palantir. General basically converting parts of the NHS into a data set. And they're going to be, I mean, Streeting is friends with Palantir. Mandelson wants to get in touch with Musk. Tom Watson is going to work for Palantir. Palantir is run by Peter Thiel, who funds your favourite fascists over in New York. Red Scare, Curtis Yarvin, all that usual bullshit over there. And I think they're going to get more integrated into our society unless we just take a big magnet. You don't blow up data centers; there's too explosive. But a big magnet will fuck them up. But unless we start getting rid of these data centers, they are going to start processing these in other ways. And indeed, the control methods they're using now are going to be the same ones that are tested in places like Gaza. The face recognition system they have there, called the Wolf system, is made out of Chinese and Dutch technology, and that is exported all around the world. I mean, for example, even at our borders, there is, their borders, I don't really give a shit about their borders, but, the borders of the United Kingdom, there is another Lord of the Rings-based fascist company called Anduril. Of course there is. Another septic enterprise. And so they have put a bunch of AI-operated towers with cameras in to detect people. And Techneva, the Portuguese company, have got drones in the channel. And recently the EU bought 100 million euros worth of Israeli drones. So I think these things are going to start becoming a bit more ramped up in terms of testing out new forms of digital apartheid, which is always physical apartheid. But also, I mean, there is a risk though, but we can't say these machines work very well. Because AI is bullshit, it doesn't work very well at all. Most face rec doesn't work very well. If you're in an apartheid state, you can stop people anyway. And, all the IDF guys are by their very nature as IDF guys racist, so they're going to stop who the fuck they want. And you can blow up these machines. You can blow them up. The smart fences around Gaza weren't so fucking smart on October 7th. And these machines blow up. So you can destroy, because if you don't talk about when resistance fighters destroy these machines, you maintain the idea it's a laboratory that works. And the idea it's a laboratory that works is not actually an analysis for the IDF, it's advertising. Because they are the startup nation for a reason. Do you know why? Because like most startups, they sell a bunch of bullshit to Americans with too much money. And if we start saying that, to quote the great philosopher Arnold Schwarzenegger, if it bleeds, we can kill it. With these machines, the Terminator can be defeated. We've seen it be defeated, and we can't advertise for it.
I guess that's something you're talking about in your book too, with this automation of apartheid. But it feels like we're sort of, are we still in that sort of place where what the other that is separated from barely exists? Is there a? I mean, I'm curious about how you see this. What has emerged over the last year, even on something like Twitter. I mean, there's kind of, I want to ask you more about what you may sort of predict of Elon Musk being so close with Trump in this new administration, but even beyond that, is like as here as you were saying outside before, here is two posters, quite notoriously maybe. Is there what is the function of short-circuiting on a platform like Twitter in terms of like citizen journalism or anything like that? Is there because I remember 10 years ago, when I was still a photography student and hadn't started talking out my arse yet, there was still a lot of hype about citizen journalism, and I guess that's around the Arab Spring. Is there still a place for that in this kind of post-cybernetic horrorscape?
I think there is. I think the platforms aren't solely determined by someone like Musk because he's also a product of it. I mean, why on earth does that man want to be liked with that much money he has? These people want to be liked, they want to be loved because they have, in a way, been driven into the same subjectivity that posting engenders in someone, especially within the confines of a platform which is a production line for content between ads. I mean, regarding what Musk can do, I mean, there's a risk here, right? So if I gave a cybernetic analysis of what Musk is doing and saying he's doing this, this, and this, again, that risk being advertising, it's saying he's smarter than he is. But it's not enough to just say that he's an idiot, even though he is, because I mean, Adorno and Horkheimer talk about this kind of, there's this element in 1930s Germany, which was sort of this intellectual leftist reading of like, well, Hitler's so stupid, he's going to fuck it up. No, the enemy can be completely fucking stupid and completely fucking effective at the same time. We can't, it's not just this sort of, stupidity has its problems as analysis, of course, but just generally we can't write them off because whoever gets like the last 5 minutes of Trump's attention determines the policies. I mean, it's and given insofar as he runs this Department of Government Efficiency with another terminally online idiot, Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, I don't really know what they're going to do. I think they're just trying to strip the copper wiring out of the walls. With what Mandelson is talking about getting closer to Musk, I don't know how. I think they're just going to sell off more of the. They're going to say we're going to put like more and more money into the NHS. It's all going to go into data centers with Thiel and maybe Musk. And again, I don't want to big them up as being more competent or effective than they are. So I think it is just going to be. It requires a more stringent analysis of data economy insofar as it's going to overcode more and more of our everyday existence. There's
a book that I was reading recently that I'm not sure if I liked it or not. It was called My Child, the Algorithm by Hannah Silver, about a queer single parent living in London, both raising a child and having a go with a large language model. And kind of having this argument that's probably not that dissimilar to the one in my last book, though I'm now sort of waning on it, which is that the ChatGPT is fundamentally too straight for or too. It's another mechanism for social reproduction. And I guess she offers a solution is one way of going about this, simply to just fill these data centers with more diverse positions. To add more data than what is being, I guess, there is a kind of a preferential treatment on something like Twitter. Is that a worthy point of sort of resistance, or is it better to just blow them up?
I mean, probably the second one, but it does remind me of something I did see a while ago, and it was I remember seeing a billboard on Mare Street, and it was for Dove soap, and it was their ethical AI guidelines. Essentially, that this is basically download Dove's set of prompts to have a wide diversity of people in AI prompts. Which I'm like, okay, if we're diversifying the AI and not the actual people, it feels like, that's a little bit too Baudrillard / The Matrix for my taste. I mean, these machines themselves, if we just called them large language models, we didn't keep calling them AI, if they were just chatbots, I mean, fine. I mean, if there wasn't the main problem with, the fact they're being marketed essentially as AI for one, and two, they run on underpaid labour from data moderators, and also the massive ecological cost, although, that's a question of the politics of waste there more than it's a politics of any waste at all. I mean, I'm not too sure what really to say about it. I mean, I think I'd rather have a more diverse set of people talking to each other, or counselling or something. But I mean, there's also a question there about youth as well. This figure of the iPad child and that sort of fear. I mean, Fisher has that kind of fear in Flatline Constructs. He talks about Toy Story, how the toys in Toy Story are the same as the toys in real world, because, when you look at them, they don't move, just like in the toys from Toy Story. And he says something like, typically humans as they grow up, they tend to realise that certain machines which can self-correct, like gyroscopes or, cars or anything, they don't actually have personalities of their own. Whereas cybernetic systems now can have exactly the same sort of sense of agency as anything else. So a toy can respond to you, even though it doesn't necessarily have like a theory of mind or consciousness. But I think sometimes Fisher is weakest when he's pessimistic about the youth. I mean, capitalist realism, it's just him moaning about his students not paying attention. And he said, they smoke too much weed, they want Nietzsche like a cheeseburger. I'm like, well, Zero Books' sort of whole thing was to give Nietzsche as a cheeseburger at one point. That's why the books are so small. I mean, but for me, I think the more concerning thing about the New Flesh is the older people. Because, I mean, QAnon, Facebook. Facebook is basically a machine for converting middle-aged people into fascists at this point. QAnon is basically like Pokemon Go, like a VR game, where you essentially radicalize yourself based on what various posts you've consumed and various posts you share and various data you create throughout these platforms like Parler or Truth Social. I think it's more of an older generational problem, the New Flesh, than it is a younger generational problem.
Yeah.
With the exception, of course, YouTube Shorts filling people's feeds of stuff like Andrew Tate. But
yeah,
that's the last time he's being mentioned.
I think about that all the time with my dad used to volunteer for Greenpeace when I was a kid, and now he doesn't believe climate change is real. And that's entirely down to COVID and Facebook, I think. It's horrifying. I'm not sure how we're doing for time, but I'm tempted to ask you one more question and maybe open it up for other questions.
Yeah.
I guess it's the really annoying one to come. And now, after you've just published this new book, you've just done your Viva. I guess we know that Flatline Constructs is coming next. What's next beyond that? Are you working on anything new?
Yes. Okay. So the PhD is going to be turned into a book on Max Stirner, which is a bit more scholastic, a bit more dry. But as of yesterday, we just had our Kickstarter fully funded. It's still got another hour left. Currently, the other Asset Horizon guys are doing a Disco Elysium stream, as is traditional, to try and get some more cash for it. Because basically, what we're doing is we've done this book and the cover of it and the artwork inside, as well as the artwork for Antioculus, was done by a friend of ours from New York called Noah Trapolino. Does a lot of erotic arts. He keeps getting banned from Instagram. I'll say that about his artwork, that level of erotic art. And we've been teaching Bataille together for the past 3 or 4 years now in various seminars and reading groups. We want to sort of wrap this up. And so we're doing an erotic Bataille-themed tarot deck. That's what you tend to do. And then also there'll be a companion book with that, with essays from myself on Bataille and the concept of war, Bataille and Fanon, Bataille and reproduction. They're going to be critical essays because, let's be honest, Bataille is a thinker who, to use a $20 word, is very phallo-logocentric. He's influential on certain strands of feminism like Kristeva, but he's very much a masculinist thinker. We want to try and critique that. Because otherwise you just leave people like Bataille to the likes of, the fascists, essentially, who think he's like the new Yukio Mishima. But the guy was a communist. He was a theorist of class war and indeed global peace, weirdly. The thinker of eroticism and death. So that's what's coming up next. You can actually still get the deck in the book through the Kickstarter, and now it's actually funded. We should definitely get Housmans some as well.
Yeah.
So no, sorry.
Grand. well, yeah, thank you again. And yeah, still on for signing books I was
Yep.
interested. And yeah, again, thank you again for coming.
Yeah, you
And we'll do one more round of applause.
We'll see you after.